Imagine standing in a federal courtroom, the air completely still, and listening as a judge hands down a sentence of 100 years in prison.
Yeah, a full century.
Right, and not for a serial killer, not for the leader of an international drug cartel either.
No.
This staggering century-long sentence was handed down to a former Marine reservist for his role in a July 4th protest that, well, it escalated into a chaotic shootout outside a Texas ICE detention center.
No preamble.
Yeah.
Just the sheer weight of 100 years.
Exactly, and the unprecedented terrorism charges attached to it.
It's an incredible case.
If you enjoy content like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you'll always know when new content is released.
And we do have a quick status update before we really get into it.
As a quick update, we continue to monitor the Martin Stevens v. OpenAI matter. It is important to note that this is still not a lawsuit. Martin Stevens has suspended his voluntary quiet period after OpenAI filed its confidential S-1 registration statement on June 8, 2026, without first engaging with him despite having nearly a month since his final notice and more than a year since his initial notifications. Stevens views OpenAI's decision to proceed without any direct interaction as a sign of extreme disrespect. As a result, he has stated that he will not re-enter a quiet period unless it is part of a formal agreement. At the time of this recording, no settlement discussions or negotiations have been publicly confirmed. We can also report that the dead man's switch has not been activated, meaning Martin Stevens remains safe from both a physical and legal standpoint. We will provide updates if circumstances change.
Okay, so returning to the Prairie Land Detention Center trial.
Yes, returning our focus there. But before we plunge into the mechanics of this case, I need to make something unequivocally clear to you.
But the disclaimer.
Yeah. The sources we are drawing from today contain highly politically charged viewpoints from across the political spectrum, from both the left and the right.
Very polarized.
Extremely. And we are not taking any sides here. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints, ideologies, or, political statements contained in these documents.
Not at all.
Our goal is impartially to convey the facts, the legal arguments, and the ideas exactly as they were presented in the original source material.
Right, because the focus of this deep dive is a singular night, July 4, 2025.
In Alvarado, Texas.
Exactly. And how a demonstration there culminated in the first federal convictions of individuals linked to Antifa under the new domestic terrorism designation.
Which is a huge legal milestone.
It is. We're dissecting the legal architecture that turned that one single night into a combined 450 years in federal prison for 8 defendants.
450 years, it's just staggering.
It really is. But to understand the gravity of these sentences, you kind of have to understand the timeline of the violence first.
So let's establish that baseline, right? The physical reality of that night.
Yeah, let's look at the late hours outside the Prairie Land facility.
Which is an ICE detention center.
Right. A group gathers. And within a very short window, the situation moves from a static demonstration to, well, active property destruction.
Like fireworks being thrown over the fencing toward the facility?
Yeah, and the property sustains significant vandalism. They slash the tires on a government vehicle.
A guard shack gets defaced too, I think.
Defaced, yeah. And surveillance cameras are systematically broken.
So obviously that destruction prompts an immediate 911 call from the correctional officers inside.
Naturally. And Alvarado Police Lieutenant Thomas Gross responds to the scene.
And the timeline just accelerates dramatically the moment he arrives, right?
It really goes. Gunfire erupts in the darkness. Lieutenant Gross is struck in the neck.
Wow. But he survived, right?
He did survive, and he has since fully recovered. But in the immediate chaos following the gunshot, the shooter, Benjamin Hanl Song, the Marine reservist we mentioned, he evades capture.
He just vanishes into the night.
Right. The remaining individuals are apprehended near the scene, but Song remains a fugitive for over a week.
Until July 15.
Exactly. That's when he's finally captured.
So, okay, that sequence of events is pretty much universally agreed upon by both sides.
Yeah, nobody's debating the physical timeline.
Right. A protest happened, vandalism occurred, an officer arrived, and that officer was shot by Song.
The physical reality is static.
But a physical timeline alone doesn't secure a century-long federal prison sentence. I mean, to lock in those unprecedented numbers, the prosecution had to prove a specific, premeditated intent.
They had to bridge this massive legal gap.
Right. The gap between a chaotic, violent night and a highly coordinated terrorist strike.
Yeah, because that split-second decision by Song to pull the trigger is the epicenter of the trial.
And to secure these convictions, the government had to prove his decision wasn't just spontaneous panic.
No, they had to prove it was the climax of a tactical operation.
So how did the prosecution build that case?
Well, the burden on the prosecution was to demonstrate that this was a North Texas Antifa cell executing a planned ambush.
A planned ambush.
Right. And they built that framework around the sheer volume of preparation and the highly tactical nature of the gear the group deployed.
We're talking about individuals dressed uniformly in black bloc, right?
Yeah, the dark clothing, face coverings to hide their identities. And they brought 11 firearms to the scene.
11 firearms
Yeah.
just for one night.
Right. Plus, they killed their telemetry by sealing their mobile devices in Faraday bags.
So no location data could be tracked at all.
Exactly. Complete operational security. They also brought body armor.
And the medical kits.
Yeah. These weren't just Band-Aids. They carried military-grade first aid kits outfitted with tourniquets specifically designed to treat massive hemorrhagic trauma.
Like gunshot wounds.
Like gunshot wounds.
You know, it's honestly like looking at a Rorschach test.
Very mean.
Well, we have this static physical evidence, right?
Yeah.
The tourniquets, the black clothing, the Faraday bags. But because this decentralized movement operates without a formal manifesto or a rigid hierarchy, the jury is forced to project intent onto those inanimate objects.
That's a great point.
I mean, the prosecution looks at a trauma kit, and they project a paramilitary strike team prepping for an inevitable firefight with law enforcement.
Right.
But the defense looks at that exact same trauma kit, and they project a group of citizens utterly terrified of being assaulted by counter-protesters or, experiencing heavy-handed police tactics.
It's all about context.
The objects remain exactly the same, but the psychological mechanism of the trial hinges entirely on how the jury contextualizes them. How did the prosecution combat that ambiguity?
Well, they introduced a massive digital and logistical footprint to prove premeditation.
Okay, so going beyond just the gear at the scene.
Exactly. They presented evidence that prior to the events of July 4th, this specific network had acquired over 50 firearms across the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Over 50, wow.
Yeah, a serious arsenal. And they introduced encrypted messaging threads utilizing auto-delete protocols.
Right, where the group was allegedly planning things.
Where they explicitly discussed conducting reconnaissance on the Prairie land facility.
That definitely paints a different picture.
It does. Furthermore, a cooperating witness testified that during a gear check the night before the incident, Song instructed the group to bring rifles.
Just flat out told them to bring rifles.
Yeah, allegedly stating he wasn't going to be arrested.
And then you add the body cam audio to all of that.
Oh, the body cam audio was crucial.
Right as Lieutenant Gross arrives and begins issuing commands in the dark, you hear Benjamin Song yell, "Get to the rifles!" immediately before opening fire.
It's pretty damning.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, when you stack the 50 firearms, the encrypted recon chats, the telemetry blocking bags, and that battle cry.
The get to the rifles line, yeah.
The prosecution's narrative of a premeditated operation becomes incredibly difficult to dismantle. You are no longer looking at a spontaneous riot.
No, you're looking at logistics, supply chains, and operational security.
So how on earth did the defense attempt to dismantle that?
Well, they tried to reframe the environment itself.
What does that mean?
They argued that bringing firearms and tactical trauma kits to a protest in the highly polarized climate of 2025 is simply a baseline self-preservation measure.
Basically saying, it's dangerous out there, we needed to protect ourselves.
Exactly. Their core argument was that this was designed as a late-night noise demonstration.
Oh, right, using the fireworks to signal solidarity with the detained immigrants inside the facility.
Yes. In fact, one defendant, Autumn Hill, she provided a statement describing the gathering as feeling more like a party to me than anything else.
A party? With body armor and AR-15s?
That was her claim. Her defense counsel even pointed out that after the fireworks were set off, she stayed behind to pick up the trash.
Wait, she was picking up firework debris.
Yeah. The rhetorical question posed to the jury was pretty obvious. What kind of elite terrorist strike team stops to clean up their firework trash during an extraction?
Okay, that detail about the trash is a fascinating counter-narrative, but it all circles back to Song's own testimony, doesn't it?
It really does. Because he admitted to pulling the trigger.
Right. So the entire defense hinged on his internal state of mind in that exact split second.
Yeah. Song testified that he fired because he saw Lieutenant Gross raise a weapon toward a fleeing, unarmed protester.
He described witnessing that moment as his worst nightmare.
Exactly. As a firearms instructor and a Marine veteran, he claimed he was convinced he was about to witness an unjustified police shooting.
He explicitly cited high-profile past victims of police violence on the stand, didn't he?
He did, arguing his action was the defense of another person's life from what he believed was imminent slaughter, not a premeditated ambush.
So you have these two wildly different narratives, and the jury spends 12 days in Fort Worth evaluating those competing realities.
12 long days. They heard from 46 witnesses and reviewed over 210 exhibits.
Ranging from DNA and fingerprint analysis to the encrypted chat logs and the surveillance footage.
It was a mountain of evidence. But the defense made a highly scrutinized tactical decision.
Right. They rested their case immediately after the prosecution finished, without calling a single witness of their own.
Not one.
You know, usually when a defense team rests without calling a single witness, it is a massive, calculated gamble.
It's betting everything on reasonable doubt.
Exactly. They're betting that the prosecution completely failed to meet their burden of proof.
But looking at the sheer volume of physical evidence.
The armory of 50 weapons, the recon chats, the body cam audio.
Right.
Relying solely on the concept of reasonable doubt seems less like a strategic masterstroke and more like a total lack of alternative exculpatory narratives.
It's hard to explain away 50 guns.
You cannot just wave away a cache of 50 firearms by saying the government didn't connect the dots perfectly. A jury demands an explanation for that level of armament.
And the jury certainly required more of an explanation because they convicted 9 defendants.
9 of them.
Yeah. And those convictions led to sentencing hearings that have permanently altered the legal landscape.
Let's talk about those sentences because they are just monumental. Judge Mark Pittman handed Benjamin Song a 100-year sentence for attempted murder and discharging a firearm.
100 years. And during the sentencing phase, Pittman's comments were incredibly pointed.
He stated it was by the grace of God that Song didn't kill anyone with his tripped-out AR-15.
Right, basically suggesting a guardian angel had prevented an absolute slaughter that night.
And the ripple effects hit the other defendants just as hard. Maricela Rueda received 70 years.
7.
And then Autumn Hill, Zachary Yvette, Savannah Batten, Megan Morris, and Elizabeth Soto received 50 years each.
We are talking about half a century behind bars for individuals who didn't pull a trigger.
Individuals who, according to the defense anyway, believed they were attending a noisy solidarity protest.
Yeah.
But the sentence that absolutely requires us to pause and look at the underlying mechanics of the law is Daniel Rolando Sanchez Estrada.
Oh, definitely.
He received 30 years in federal prison, and he wasn't even at the Prairie Land Detention Center that night.
Not even there. Sanchez Estrada's case is the clearest example of how far these legal mechanisms reach now.
How does someone get 30 years for an event they didn't attend?
Well, he was convicted of corruptly concealing a document or record.
Explain that.
After the shooting occurred, he moved a box of his personal belongings, we're talking artwork, poetry, journals, and zines, from his residence to a location in Denton, Texas.
He just moved a box of zines.
Right. But the government successfully argued that by transporting that specific box of what they categorized as Antifa-related propaganda and planning materials.
He was engaged in a conspiracy to conceal evidence.
Exactly, to impair its use in a federal grand jury proceeding.
Okay, you have to understand the mechanism of a terrorism enhancement here. It acts as a massive legal multiplier.
A huge multiplier.
In a vacuum, moving a box of documents to avoid a subpoena is evidence tampering. It is a serious crime, certainly, but it typically carries a sentence of a few years.
Right, maybe a couple of years.
However, when the prosecution ties that box to an organization officially designated under the 2025 executive order, the act isn't just tampering anymore.
No. Legally, it transforms into providing material support for an ongoing terrorist operation.
And that multiplier effect unlocks massive mandatory minimums.
It does.
That is how a box of journals turns into 3 decades in a federal penitentiary.
Because the material support statute is incredibly broad by design. It was originally forged to dismantle hierarchical international networks by criminalizing any assistance.
Whether it's funding, communications equipment, personnel, safe houses.
Right, any assistance given to a designated group.
So applying that specific statute to this case allowed the government to argue that peripheral actions constitute material support.
Like buying a firearm legally, doing a drive-by reconnaissance of the building, or moving a box of Zines. They argued it all constituted material support for a terror cell's planned attack.
And 7 other individuals pleaded guilty to exactly those types of material support charges, right?
Yes, and they face up to 15 years.
That really brings us to the linchpin of this entire prosecution, the Antifa designation itself.
It's the core of the whole thing.
This trial represents the very first sentencing of defendants affiliated with the movement since President Donald Trump signed the 2025 executive order designating it as a domestic terrorist organization.
Exactly. Because before that order, there was no domestic equivalent to the State Department's list of foreign terror organizations.
We didn't have a list for domestic groups.
No. And the shift from targeting foreign groups with rigid command structures like al-Qaeda to targeting domestic, decentralized ideologies fundamentally alters the burden of proof in these cases.
It changes everything.
Historically, scholars and participants have described the movement as a decentralized ideology, a method of militant direct action.
Rather than a formal group.
Right. No leader, no hierarchy, no membership roster.
Right. There is no central headquarters you can raid. There is no membership card in a wallet.
None of that.
The defense attorneys argued that applying the terrorism designation to an ideology essentially amounts to guilt by association.
Benjamin Song actually addressed this directly during his sentencing.
What did he say?
He asked the courtroom, what kind of people are not against fascism?
Wow.
The overarching defense argument is that the government stripped these individuals of their specific contexts and prosecuted them as political symbols of a broader culture war.
But the Department of Justice and the federal judges overseeing the case firmly rejected that framing, didn't they?
Firmly rejected it. Chief Judge Reed O'Connor explicitly stated that the actions at Prairie Land were not a protected First Amendment protest.
He called it an assault on democracy.
Yes, an assault on democracy. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche reinforced this perspective too,
stating that the sentences prove terrorists who attack law enforcement will face uncompromising justice.
The government relied on expert testimony to demonstrate that while the movement is decentralized, it operates through highly coordinated nodes.
Utilizing organized riots and armed confrontations to specifically target government infrastructure.
And law enforcement personnel.
You really have to look at the chilling effect this precedent creates. It is the ultimate friction point between First Amendment protections of free speech and assembly and the government's absolute mandate to prevent political violence and protect its citizens.
It's a very fine line.
And the DOJ's stance is incredibly clear. They cannot and will not wait until an officer is killed to dismantle a violent cell.
They're being proactive.
Exactly. They will use the conspiracy and material support statutes proactively to disrupt these networks before a tragedy occurs.
But critics look at the Sanchez Estrada sentence and warn of a terrifying overreach.
I mean, moving a box of zines.
Right. If the state can legally categorize medical kits and poetry zines as terrorist material, it creates a dragnet.
Think about it. If you are going to a volatile protest tomorrow and you pack a first aid kit in your trunk, just in case things get out of hand.
This is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, right. Under this new precedent, a jury can be instructed to view that medical kit not as a precaution, but as premeditated material support for political violence.
And that tension is the new reality of American jurisprudence. Similar cases utilizing this exact framework are currently moving through federal courts across the country.
So this isn't a one-off.
Not at all. The Prairie Land trial is no longer an anomaly. It is the established playbook for how federal authorities will prosecute decentralized, ideologically driven protest movements moving forward.
Which leaves you with a critical, lingering question as we look toward the future of political organization in this country. As modern movements increasingly organize online operating without formal leaders, without headquarters, and without membership roles, where exactly does the law draw the line between sharing a radical ideology with like-minded people and being an active member of a domestic terror cell?
That's the question everyone has to figure out now.
If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.